What would you do if Zira killed Kovu? What would you do if the lion she raised since day one, the one she considered her own son, betrayed her? Betrayed the mission they lived for all those years? And all of that for love. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about a battle between loyalty and love. About being raised to believe in something, and then one day, kicking that belief aside. But when you do, you pay the price. And in this case, the price is your life. We all know Zira, the lioness who dreamed of Scar becoming the eternal king, not just because she loved him, but because she believed his vision was right. She thought Mufasa and then Simba ruined the balance. That ruling needed strength, not mercy. So when Scar died, she had one hope left, Kovu. She raised Kovu from day one to become the next king. A king, not because he was her son, but because to her, he was Scar's son. He was the last card, and he believed in that. Or at least, he thought he did. But what happened next? No one saw coming. When Kovu entered the Pride Lands and met Kiara, everything flipped. Kiara saw something in him no one else did. And he saw a different life in her too. A life without killing and revenge. Without schemes. A life full of freedom, warmth, and hope. His heart began to split between how he was raised and what he felt. Between Zira's voice saying, "You're a king, you must take revenge," and Kiara's voice saying, "You're free. Choose your own path." And in the end, he chose. He chose to leave Zira and stand with Kiara and Simba. He chose to be himself, not Scar's shadow. And Zira, when she found out, she lost it. Picture Zira standing alone in the cave, her paws shaking, eyes burning. She hears whispers all around. Kovu betrayed us! Even the lionesses she raised started to doubt. The leader she dreamed of was gone. That's when the decision was made. This wasn't just rage. It was betrayal, not just rebellion. The dream was gone. Zira isn't the forgiving type, and if Kovu became the enemy, then he had to die. But the story doesn't end there, because Kiara, she won't stay quiet. Kiara, who felt love for the first time, felt safe with him for the first time, saw a partner in him for the first time. And suddenly, she loses him. His laugh gone, his gaze vanished, because of his own mother. Kiara runs, screams in disbelief. She rushes to Simba, her father, the one who always warned her, Kovu can't be trusted. But this time, she's the one asking him to act, not for war, for justice. Simba, though he's a king, always had a big heart. But in that moment, there was fire in him. He saw his daughter broken, tears boiling down her face, and he knew it was over. Zira had crossed every line. Still, instead of killing her, he exiled her. Simba believed killing was never the answer, because if he killed her, he'd be walking Scar's path, Zira's path. But by then, Zira was already somewhere else. Can you imagine the moment Zira confronted Kovu before killing him? That look in his eyes, as he says, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't keep living the lie," and her staring back with only one thought in her mind. I raised you for this moment, to get revenge, not to fall in love. She didn't see love as weakness. She saw it as betrayal. And when he reached out his paw, she raised her claw. Silence. A soft roar. Then, nothing. The lion she dreamed of was dead. Not just his body, but the dream too. And the earth shook. Everyone knew. At that moment, the Pride Lands split. Some saw Zira as a hero. Others saw her as a murderer. But one thing was certain. The game had changed. Kovu wasn't just another lion. Kovu was a symbol of hope for unity, that there wouldn't be a Scar or a Simba, but a Kovu and a Kiara. But that dream, Zira killed it with her own hands, and the story's not over yet. After Kovu's death, everything turned upside down. The Pride Lands were no longer what they used to be. There was a strange silence, a silence filled with regret, with anger, and with confusion. Every lion, every lioness, kept asking the same question. Was this meant to happen? Did Kovu really betray them? Or was he trying to save them all from an endless cycle of revenge? In the middle of all this, Kiara disappeared. The lioness who always wore a smile, the one who once dreamed of becoming queen, had turned into a shadow. She would sit alone, staring at the sky, trying to remember the last thing Kovu said, trying to hear his voice in the wind. And every night, she dreamed he was still alive. But dreams couldn't bring Kovu back, nor could they extinguish the fire burning inside her. So she decided to move. She went to her father, but not to ask for protection. She came to ask for revenge. Dad, if it were someone else who died instead of Kovu, would you have stayed silent? If I was the one who died, would you have forgiven? Simba remained silent. The king who had witnessed all forms of injustice, who had lived in exile, who had fought Scar with his own claws, now found himself cornered by his daughter's question. In that moment, he had two choices: either to avenge and break the values he lived by, or to forgive and risk being seen as weak by his pride. But Simba chose a different path. He didn't seek revenge, and he didn't forgive. He passed judgment. Zira and all who followed her were banished from the Pride Lands forever, not out of mercy, but to cut off the rotten roots and prevent the fire from reaching the next generation. Zira now lived in isolation, but the strange part? She wasn't sorry. In a cave far from the eyes of others, she sat staring at the sky and whispered, "I lost, but at least I stayed true to my vision." She didn't see what she had done as a crime. She believed Kovu was the traitor, that the one who died was the betrayer. But time never leaves things as they are. After months of silence, strange signs began to appear. Lions from beyond the Pride Lands were sneaking in. Old lionesses who once followed Zira started regrouping. Something was brewing, and in the midst of it all, there was a mysterious cub. Everyone said he was an orphan, but his features were a copy of Kovu. His voice, his walk, the way he stared. It was as if Kovu had returned. Whispers began to spread. The cub was born after Kovu's death, and Kiara was his mother. But Kiara stayed silent. She neither denied nor confirmed, and that cub began to grow. Simba? He saw in him a second chance, not to replace Kovu, but to ensure that evil would not be inherited. But the problem? Zira was still alive, and word of the cub reached her ears. Now imagine the moment Zira hears about Kovu's son, a boy who might carry on the legacy, but not her legacy. A new fire ignites. Zira didn't just lose her son. Now, someone else bears his name and walks a different path. And of course, Zira was never the type to let that slide. That's when a new revenge plan begins. But this time, the target wasn't Kovu. The target was the one who came after him. This part of the story takes a dark turn. The little cub who once chased butterflies now faced an unexpected danger. And Simba, after losing Mufasa and then Kovu, was not ready to lose his grandson or his daughter's child. So he summoned the old guard, Rafiki, Zazu, and even some lionesses from Nala's time. They all gathered to protect the cub. But what they didn't know was that the real danger wouldn't come from the outside. The real threat would come from within. One of the lionesses in the royal guard was Zira's daughter. She had hidden herself well and was waiting for the perfect moment. And that is where the tragedy begins again. Days passed, and the little cub grew up. He began to run across the Pride Lands. His voice got deeper, his steps more confident. But his eyes? They still carried the same confusion. Who was he? Whose son was he? Why did every eye stare at him that way? Kiara tried to protect him from the truth, but the truth kept creeping closer, especially when the name Kovu started echoing around him. Kovu's son. He looks just like Kovu. He must be Kovu's child. And in a moment of weakness, he asked his mother, "Who's my real father?" And for the first time, Kiara couldn't answer. She stayed silent, looked into his eyes, then hugged him and said, "What matters most is that you're my son. The rest, you'll learn in time." But time wasn't on their side. Far away, in a hidden cave, Zira stood before an army of lionesses she thought were long gone. But they had been waiting for a signal. This isn't revenge. It's correction of history. Zira spoke, her voice dripping with hatred and old pain. And the plan began. A dark night. The Pride Lands asleep, but in the distance, eyes moved in the shadows. The target? The young cub. Not to kill him, but to take him. Raise him their way. Make him the new version of Kovu, but one who didn't betray his mother. And in a single moment, everything flipped. The cub disappeared. Kiara woke up to the lioness's screams. Simba rushed in, and the whole pride gathered. The tracks were clear. This was Zira. Kiara was no longer the gentle girl who loved with her eyes before her heart. Now, she was an angry lioness, a wounded mother, and in her eyes burned a fire even Scar never witnessed at his strongest. "I'll bring my son back," she said it in a low voice, and no one dared to stop her. Simba tried. "Not alone, Kiara." But she looked him dead in the eye and said, "This time, I'm not asking permission. I'm coming to take what's mine. She followed the trail. She knew exactly where Zira would be. The old hut on the edge of the gorge, the place where Zira used to hide long ago. She arrived and found the cub tied up, standing before Zira. And the surprise? The cub was smiling. "What are you doing here?" the child asked his mother, innocently. Kiara looked at him, then at Zira. "What did she tell you?" The cub looked at Zira, then said, "She told me my father died because he betrayed her, and that you're not supposed to be my mom." In that moment, Kiara felt her heart split in two. "No, sweetheart, that's a lie. Your father died protecting me, protecting you, and our future." Zira laughed bitterly and said, "I told him the truth everyone's afraid to admit. Kovu betrayed me and chose royalty over his own blood." And then the confrontation began. Not a fight of claws or bites, but a battle of words. Each one defending her story, her memories, her pain. The cub stood between them, and with every word he heard, something inside him broke. But suddenly, he spoke. "I won't be a copy of Kovu or anyone else. I'll be me." That moment ended everything. Zira lost her final hope of control, and in her voice, only defeat. She looked at the cub and said, "Then you'll die like your father." But before she could move, Kiara attacked. The battle everyone feared finally happened. A clash between mother and daughter, past and future, revenge and love. And in a defining moment, Kiara brought Zira down, but didn't kill her. She looked into her eyes and said, "I'm not like you. I won't pass on blood to my son." Kiara returned home with her son, and Zira was exiled again, but this time with no hope of return. They came back to the Pride Lands. The cub grew older and was given a new name, one not tied to Scar or Kovu. He chose his own path, and Simba looked at the girl who was once his little daughter and saw a queen. This story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about hope, hope born from the ashes. About a cub who refused to be a copy and chose to create a new future. When Kovu died, we thought the story ended. But the truth? It had only just begun. And in the world of The Lion King, there are always stories waiting to be discovered, even after it's too late. But what matters most is that we listen and we learn. If you enjoyed the story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, who should the next story be about? And which character do you think truly deserves to have their tale told?